So another great episode of The Hiring Room. I have someone I deeply respect for her work,
Mhm,
Chris Johnson,
mhm,
Dr. Johnson, actually.
mhm.
And so great to have you here. Thank you so much. I know you're a busy lady, so I'm super excited to spend a little time with you today. I could have you on for 5 hours, but we'll keep it to our 1 hour.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I always like to share what I've learned and can offer, so it's all great.
And you share a lot. So, first off, I just want to say, I actually delved into your background even more. And obviously, I know you because you did a presentation for one of the women's group here.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've got a really robust education behind you. So how did
Mhm,
you go or did you go from sort of a clinical background, so to speak, right,
mhm,
into
mhm.
this leadership coaching? How did you end up here?
Okay, you want the long version or the kinda medium
Whatever
version or
you
the
want to
short skinny?
whatever.
Well, so a little bit kind of a like the medium version is that I grew up with 2 entrepreneurial parents, and so they both had their own businesses. My dad later on, like when I was in high school, ran for public office in the
Oh,
local
wow.
government, and so we were involved a lot in that growing up as a kid, and we got to see mom and dad be involved in all kinds of local politics where hopefully we can make a difference. So fast forward, I go to a graduate school for social work. And
Yeah.
at the time, I was really torn. Was I going to get a doctoral degree? Was I going to get a master's degree? What was I going to do it in? So by the time I did go and get a social work degree with a focus on administration and policy,
Mm,
and got a job doing clinical work in a community mental health center. And it was at that time I was offered the option to work with an employee assistance program. And what I was really toying with before I went back to get my doctoral degree is would I go get a degree in IO psychology? Would I go
mm,
get more of a clinical degree? Because I really like working with people in their businesses. Mom and dad were entrepreneurs. I then started a practice. So it wasn't a far leap at all to think about. Yeah, so that's what I would say. That's kinda how the trajectory went. I got
okay.
involved, with an EAP program, which was external to organizations, and I was working internal with some organizations, and it kinda blossomed from there. Yep.
So you've been doing this a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
so what you see out there, and I have to tell you this news. I was going to tell you offline, but I'll just tell you now.
Cool.
I'm starting a graduate program next week at Lewis, National Lewis University,
Cool.
to get my MS in counseling.
You go, rock on, I like it.
I know, and so I thought it was, I'm so fascinated by psychology and, like, I
Yeah.
nerd out in all of it, and being a
Uh-huh.
recruiter, you work with people every day. I've been doing this for 25 years, running my own
Yeah.
businesses, and I thought
Yeah.
to myself, "Well, it gives me a lot of plus you can career coach with it," and I just liked
Uh-huh.
it that it was and this
Mhm.
is not against any career coaches out there, this is not what I'm
Mhm.
saying. I wanted a little
Mhm.
bit more robust, like,
Yeah.
process with it,
Mhm.
you know what I
Sure.
mean? And I
Yeah.
think what's interesting is I think maybe I feel like that's what really sets you apart from some other
Hmm.
coaches I've seen, is
Hmm.
just that you are licensed to do therapy too. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I mean, does it cross over when you're doing some of this coaching for leaders? Like, does it cross over at all?
It definitely does. So,
Okay.
initially, employee assistance program, their history started with addiction in the workplace. That's kind of the short skinny, alcohol and drug, and then it expanded to
Interesting.
wellness. And I grew up in a family where addiction was an issue. So I had kind of a sensitivity to it. So it's like, this is kind of cool. I'll do this. And we're working with people at work and we're addressing kind of this addiction thing. It's kind of a great
Yeah,
way. So what happened then, fast forward through the years, not too
yeah.
long either, is that we had some really intensive personal trauma in the family. And so it involved my sister. You can imagine what it is. And I have her permission to share, but she was
Okay.
brutally assaulted. And when that
Oh.
happened, I kind of took a dog leg, doing the addiction like in the workplace, and it was like, oh, we're going to go this way. So I really focused the next 20 years doing a deep dive into trauma treatment. A lot of people who are addicted have trauma histories. And
Yeah.
then here's the real kicker. So I end up in the office working with clients, and then it would invariably bring in their spouse or maybe a kid or two. And then they started talking about work, and all these patterns of trauma are showing up at the workplace and they're showing up in leadership and in management positions. It's like, this is all of a piece. It's not really separate at all. So, what I have been really fortunate
Mm.
to do is I've had amazing teachers, amazing mentors, and they've taught me a lot. And I bring it all to the table and can sort through and support people. So, I love it.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I love it. I
Hmm.
then we'll have to go to lunch. I'll have to treat you to lunch or dinner because I wanna just pick your brain on all this. But,
Cool.
I mean, I'm obviously later in my career here,
Hmm.
for doing
Yeah. Well,
this, but
yeah.
a friend of mine has a really big practice in Chicago,
Uh huh.
and she's
Yeah.
amazing.
Uh huh.
And she said people look for older people in counseling. They look for older people in counseling. She's
A
like,
little
"You're
more
gonna have"
seasoning.
like, see, yeah, she's like, "You're gonna have no problem being creating getting a clientele." She's like, "Not at all."
Yeah.
She's like, "These
Yeah.
people kinda look for us." So I was like, "'Cause, in business,
Hmm.
that's not the way it is."
No.
Right?
Mm-mm, not
In
at all.
business, it's the opposite. So in business, I wouldn't even no one would even interview me, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's kind of
Hmm.
interesting with that, but, so
Yeah.
amazing, and so as I'm going through this journey a little bit, I was thinking about, obviously you've got your book, Leadership
Yeah.
Pause,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I
Can I
have.
show him? Here we go. This guy. This one.
Uh-huh, yeah, man, and
Uh-huh.
I've got it on my bookshelf too. I should have had it back here on my bookcase, and I don't.
It's okay.
And so what was interesting about it is that, and you're gonna know this, and I'm gonna flub
Hmm.
this up,
Hmm.
is it the ACT method in
The ACT
psychology?
method.
The
It's one
ACT
of the.
method. Russ Harris, I think, is it. So I bought the book because
Uh-huh.
I'm just gonna find out some one of the better books out there. This isn't part of the program.
Hmm.
I just bought it. And as
Hmm.
I was reading it, oh my gosh, this is Chris Johnson, a lot of Chris Johnson. But
Hmm.
the other thing
Hmm.
is that I think I have a pretty advanced meditative practice.
Yeah.
And so I also am a big believer in Michael Singer's Untethered Soul. And I was like, okay, wait a
Hmm.
minute. This
Hmm.
is Untethered Soul.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
first four stages or pillars, or whatever they call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
I was so excited about this
Yeah.
methodology. I'm sure there's a ton of
Yeah.
other ones I'll learn, but I was like,
Uh
"Okay,
huh.
this is really good because this is not far off by some of the knowledge I already know." So, it sort of just made
Yes.
me feel better, not that this is about me, made me feel
Uh,
better that it was very much in sync with some of the things that I buy into anyway. So that was really
yeah.
exciting. So, anyway, so I saw some of the leadership pause when I just started
Mm-hmm.
reading the ACT book. We call it ACT book. I just started reading it. I'm only a couple chapters in. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about why out of all your knowledge that you have,
Hmm.
and I still do some of the techniques that you showed where you stand up and and I show
Mm-hmm.
people that one too because it's just like
Good.
yeah,
Excellent.
that reset in the moment is
Hmm.
amazing. What made and out of all of the things that you've done, you chose this area, right?
Hmm.
You chose the leader like the pause, right? You talk about the pause in a lot of different scenarios, but
That's right.
what made you decide that was one of the most effective things?
Yeah. So back here on my bookshelves, you'll
Yeah.
find a couple of books on ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy. It's a
So
behaviorally based process that incorporates the best of a lot of mindfulness practices. So if you go back to my comment that we had some personal trauma in our
yeah.
family, right about that time, I was working with a practice group that focused almost exclusively on trauma and how to treat trauma in couples,
Okay.
individuals, families. And we see a lot of anxiety with trauma, as it makes sense, post traumatic stress, other kinds of anxiety.
Yeah.
And so my colleague and I, this was at the time that John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the mindfulness kind of gurus, bringing mindfulness to the West out at the University of Massachusetts.
Okay.
He had developed a program called mindfulness based stress reduction.
Okay.
And what he was doing, he's a a biology medicine guy. I'm blanking on his proper title
That's
right
okay.
now. But he, for his personal use, he had started meditating, going to yoga, and he brought it into the hospital system, and he was
Mhm.
relegated to the basement. He said, "Hey, I got this program. Can you help me? Can you give me a space and give me all your hardest patients?" And these are medical patients, like pulmonary patients, cardiac patients. And
Okay.
so he started teaching and piloting his program that later became MBSR. So
Okay.
around about the time I was going through like my family trauma, they were developing a training program for MBSR. And a colleague and I went to do the training. They were
Okay.
early on in training teachers, but we got in on the front end. We started teaching mindfulness in the community. So I've been doing that for the last 25 plus years. So that comes together because one of your questions to me was, why this, why now? And
Yeah.
I really believe if you can do only one thing as a leader, as a person, but one thing in your leadership is to learn the power of pause. Because when we do that, we regulate our nervous systems. We can think clearly. We can't think clearly when things are going crazy. And once you do that, you have access to good decision making. You have access to, like, what do I care about? None of that exists when we're freaked out with anxiety or in a trauma space. It just doesn't. You can't access it. And it's not because you're not trying, it's
Yeah.
because biologically it is impossible to.
Okay, interesting. You know what I have seen? So I'm curious about how
Mm,
much acceptance. I mean, you
mhm.
coach big leaders. You're a CEO
Yeah.
coach, right? You're doing leadership coaching. And so when you're working with somebody,
Mhm,
okay, what has there been pushback with that? And the reason I'm saying that is that
mm,
I try not to be that friend that, lectures people, right? Because what I find with people what
mhm,
I find with people is they want you to listen, they don't really want you to give advice, right?
mhm.
So I always
Yeah.
ask permission to give advice.
That's smart. That's very
Is
smart.
that smart?
Mhm,
Because those people
mhm.
really don't want you to tell them any what to do or what to do,
It's
but
kinda human
sometimes if you
nature, actually.
right,
We
and
don't
so
want
but
people to tell us what to do.
when you find a tool
Yeah,
that's life-changing for yourself, it's hard not to be
yeah,
excited to share it, you know what I mean?
yeah. That's
So I
right.
had a friend who was having extreme anxiety, who
Oh,
was having physical like, she would say on a scale of 1 to 10, she was a 10 all day long, where she started to
that's a
get some
concern.
physical issues and things like that, and so I
Mhm,
listened and listened and listened, and I'm a
mm,
problem solver, and I was like, "Okay, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, just listen, listen, listen," and I finally had to say, "You know, would you be
mhm,
open to some meditation or just, like, some really simple things?" You don't have to do
mhm,
my yogic ancient kriyas, I don't expect people
mhm,
to do those things, but
mhm.
just 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and I always get pushback from people, and the first
Mhm,
thing people say to me is, "I can't sit that I can't, settle my mind that way." I don't have to tell you what
mhm,
people say, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I have
mhm,
ADHD. Are you kidding me?"
mhm,
It happens all
mhm.
the time to people. It's normal to have the thoughts go crazy, right? But I
Yeah,
always get pushback on it.
of course.
Now, I did have one gentleman recently who I was talking to as a friend, and he's having a rough time about something. I was just talking to him, and then he
Mhm,
texted me about 6 months. Like, he texted me recently, but 6 months ago, he goes, "Renee, I just have to tell you something. We've been meditating. My wife and I have been meditating twice a day for 180 days, and it's changed my life." And I
mhm.
literally was, like, almost crying. I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "Okay, here's a book you should read." I'm not an expert, but I can toss you to the direction of the experts, you
Yeah,
know? But do
yeah,
you get pushback on that initially?
of course, all the
Yeah.
time.
How do you handle that?
People
Like
people well, people say things like, "I don't have time to sit still. I
Yep,
can't quiet my mind." One of the quotes that I cite in my book,
yeah,
is from Kevin Cashman, who also he's a leadership expert himself and has written a book around pausing as well, and he's like, "Why would any hard-charging business person, entrepreneur think that they could pause?" And, like, that nobody's gonna think that's a good idea. But it's exactly the antidote because what we don't realize is that, we're biological beings, we're mammals. And so,
yeah,
first and foremost, and so when people give pushback, it totally makes sense that they would. But what they don't get, typically, unless they know somebody like me, is to know that the research says that our minds are wandering about half the time.
yeah,
So, our minds are wandering about half the time. It's kind of a normal state, but it's trainable. And just like training in athletics of any sport or training in music or any other kind of training, we can train ourselves in little bits to get more and more focused. And what it does, Renee, is really cool. And like your guy that said, "Oh, 180 days we've been doing this, it's changed our lives," because you're literally changing your brain and where the neural pathways go. If you never train it, life will still happen. You'll still have the life, it'll be fine. But if you
yeah,
want to train your attention, that's like the first key. If you do that, all kinds of the world opens up to us. And if we don't, we just don't have access to it. So I don't know if you're a high performer, I want additional access to all that great stuff. And if
yeah,
you don't really care, then okay, don't do it. It's fine. You can not do it.
yeah. Yeah. So how do you so your normal do you get pushback initially when you work? I mean, obviously, if they're seeking you out, they should be open to you as the expert, right? Like you would hope, right?
Mhm,
But tell me a little bit about like what you see behind closed doors with some of these execs. Especially now, because I do want to get into, and I know
mm,
it should be like a 4-letter word, but I do want to get to AI a little bit because you've
uh-huh,
got to be seeing a
Mhm.
crazy amount of stress with it, I would imagine, in the workplace.
So what's the question exactly? Tell me what
So
you
the
want.
question is so the question is, you get this pushback from them, right?
Yeah.
Do you see them? Because well, let's talk about the format of how you work. So, are you, like, in the setting with them? Because that's different than having a conversation alone, or are you working within the organizations and kinda seeing them in action? Because I would think
Yes.
that would be very
All of the above.
beneficial. All
All of
of
the
the
above.
above. Okay. Okay. So what have you seen for some of these results? You have a leader, he's listening to your coaching. What have
Mhm.
you seen in the transformation with this? Like, so it's mostly like training the brain to have greater access to focus is really kind of what you're saying to me. And
That's
then with
huge.
that, with the pause, of course, they're not acting as impulsively,
Mhm.
obviously, right? With their
Mhm.
team, I would imagine. So what kind of results do you usually see in a couple of months if someone's actually listening to you and executing?
Well, it's less important that they listen to me, although that's a big bonus and it always important. It's less important listening to me and more important, I do a lot of experiments with people. I
Okay.
challenge them to do short-term experiments, to just try it on, like your person with 180 days. Like just give it a
Yeah.
go and try it.
Yeah.
Set a little goal and see what you start to notice because you want to increase people's awareness. And everybody's all about performance. So if you really want high performance, you're going to decide to take this on. And if you don't, then you basically are getting caught up in old habits. Happens to everybody. We have to
Yeah.
really be intentional about what we care about and if we actually want to perform at high levels. A lot of people say they do, and they actually don't because it is easier to default to what makes us comfortable. I often say that discomfort is highly undervalued. Being uncomfortable
Yeah.
is really kind of the edge that we want to work at. Not so uncomfortable that you freak yourself out, but just uncomfortable enough, like, "Yeah, I gotta that." So when leaders finally take this on, and it that could mean lots of things to different people,
Yeah.
they'll start to notice a difference in pretty short order. Like I know in the leadership pause, I wrote a story about a guy that I worked with named Paul. Paul was a small business owner. Paul had been in the war. He started this business when he came home. He had a lot of PTSD symptoms
Mhm.
and manifest in relationships, personally, but at work. He had really great ideas. He built a business. It was really successful. He sold the guy. But when I met him, another psychologist recommended him who was seeing he and his wife. And he said, "Hey, Chris, can he participate in your class, your mindfulness class? Because he hasn't been sleeping." And when I interviewed him for the class, he hadn't been sleeping in like 25 years, a full
Oh, it's
night's sleep
so
since he'd been
bad
out
for
of
your
the
health.
it's so bad for your health. And so I'm like, he said, "Hey doc." They always like to call me doc. "Hey doc, what
Well, you are a
I mean,
doc.
can you guarantee this?" I said, "No,
Oh,
I cannot
boy.
guarantee this. What I can say is that if you decide to take it on, effectively to take yourself on, if you decide
Yeah.
to do this and put this into practice, something will shift." And sure enough, about week 3, so the first time, second time, he talked about not sleeping in the class, and, we do the thing and we have the class. He came back the 3rd session and he started to cry. And this guy is like,
Oh.
I don't know, 6'5" and a linebacker, and he's like he was sitting there and he got all flummoxed and teary, and he's like, "I slept through the night all week." Now that is humongous, and so
Oh
that
my
if you get good
god.
rest and you can think
Enormous.
clearly, yeah, it's huge, and then he could make more effective decisions. He could dial in like, "Why am I doing what I'm doing at work? Why is the business doing what we're doing in business? What difference does it make?" And all of those kinds of purpose questions and then execution toward the purpose can happen. But
Right.
if you can't sleep and if you can't pay attention, there's not options are way closed versus being
Yeah.
open. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see patterns in the leaders of ones that, certain characteristics of kinda how they operate that are more effective? I'm, like, more thinking about managing their
Mm,
teams because what I see on this side of the
mm.
table is,
Yeah. Love to
you
know.
know, what's interesting is that we
Mhm,
tend to promote people who are good technically at what they do, and no one
mhm.
ever prepares them for the leadership side of things, like, ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
totally different skill set, it's a different do you see the gap in that in companies? And when you see that,
Sure.
does it take a lot to tune someone into that? I would think it probably wouldn't if they're open to making that change.
Well, the kind of coaching that I do, I mean, as you mentioned, I have a lot of training and a lot of skills that I bring that I can assist
Yeah.
with. But the kind of
you have a big
coaching that I
toolbox.
do, I have a big toolbox, but the kind of coaching that I do is really developmental. So we
Okay.
think of kids as the ones who develop. We have babies, we have grammar school, we have high school, junior high, high school, and kids go through stages. Actually, we do too as adults. So it's a misnomer to think that we don't develop. Although there's a number of people who tap out at a certain level of development, and I'm talking internal operating system, the capacity to take more and effective action, to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty more. And there are developmental stages. So that's my orientation when I'm listening to where people are at. Not all leaders are at the different developmental levels that are at the highest level. So it's really like listening for where's somebody at?
Right.
How is it showing up? Are they at a transition point between like stages of development in this internal operating system? Because leaders who are super effective in the workplace long term have higher degrees of managing complexity because they can manage it inside themselves. And so if I can't do
Mm.
that as a leader, I can lean into my team, and surely I should, but that's really the edge that I work with people. So I am not a short-term kind of gal. We can do
Yeah.
some things short-term, but the work as leaders is usually all inner operating system. And leaders, by the way, thinking of teams, they always go first. So if I want you, so here's the thing, you try to
Yeah.
work, like do some consulting opportunity inside an organization, and they say, hey, I want you to come and work with my team. And I would likely say, I need you to be part of that or you to go first. And
Of
if you
course.
don't, I can't, because this is going to come downstream from wherever that leader is. And so this is the real work, and it's totally worth the investment if somebody's game. And if they're not, no harm, no foul, but they're going to top out at certain levels, I
So
think.
when you say you said something about people are adults are some are incapable of developing more. Are you saying
No,
that
they are capable of developing more.
they are capable? Okay, so we're all capable. It's just if people
Mhm.
choose to want to do the work.
Right. I mean, there are some people who have maybe a disability or something like that, and it's going
Yeah,
to be harder for them. But
sure.
my diagnostic, if you will, is where's somebody at developmentally, and are they interested in going to the next level of adult development, which means greater and more capacity to be present, to access all their skills, to learn more and keep learning. So a lot of adult development has to do with one's capacity to keep learning.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
That
Does that
makes a
make
lot of
sense?
sense. Yeah, it totally
Yeah.
makes sense. Totally makes
Mhm.
sense. So with now, so where have you any kind of a situation you can share where you really saw like an amazing impact? Meaning like
Mm,
one of the leaders was really struggling, the team was well, I don't know, like you see a lot of pressure with
mm.
mergers and acquisitions, right? When something
Yeah.
like high pressure,
Uh-huh.
high stakes, a lot of stress. Where have
Mhm.
you like do you have any like crazy success story that you can share where you
Mm.
implemented some of these theories and you just saw like a transformation where I could imagine some
Mhm.
of these leaders have like these aha moments like, "Oh my gosh, this actually really worked." And I would imagine the people on the team were like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much."
Yeah. Well,
Would go
actually, it's
down the
interesting.
drain.
I just was working with a team, a small executive team, and one of the newer members, she's been around a long time, but a newer member of the executive team pulled me aside and said, hey, I don't know what you've been doing for the last few years with him, but I
Okay.
can really see a difference. And I see it this way and this way and this way. And this is how it's affecting our team. So that's an example without giving, proprietary information
Yeah,
away.
no,
But
of
that's
course.
exactly what happens. Yeah, I worked with a guy, I'm thinking of another client who I worked with for about a year and a half, and he recently came back, and he's like, "I'm so much calmer, and now I have better capacity to think clearly about the decisions I need to make. I am stuck over here with another of my colleagues. Can you help me with this?" In terms of some of the relational stuff on the
I bet
team,
that
right?
happens a lot or that can
It
really
does.
hinder
Yeah.
on it. Like, so I think
Mhm.
sometimes with some of this stuff is that you when you learn something like this and you see that it works, you have a different lens. It's like putting on a different pair of glasses.
Mhm.
And then you can't unsee it. And then you're working with someone and you're thinking to yourself,
Mhm.
wow, right? Like we're working from completely different angles. And how do I get that person to move towards me or I move towards them or how do
Mhm.
on those relationships? Because I noticed that when I started just like being aware of it, you
Mhm.
can't you're just aware then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's in front of
Yeah.
you.
It is. So you were saying something earlier, like how do you get people? You're so excited to share something and you want to, and then, you know, so always asking permission is really just smart. But if you think
Yeah.
about, like, I know you have kids, I know you have sons,
Yeah,
right?
3
And
sons,
so,
yeah.
and you got some grandbabies and all that. And so you would not in a million years, how old's your youngest grandchild?
I only have 1, and he's gonna be
Oh,
3 in June. We only have 1
okay.
right now, yeah.
You only have one right now. So you would
1
not in a
young and
million,
old, he's the only one.
you say, okay, you would not expect that that little guy or gal, is little
Guy.
guy,
Of
yeah,
course,
you would
we have
not
boys.
expect that that little guy who's 3 could act like he's 8 or could show up like he's 12.
Sure, right.
You wouldn't do that,
No,
and because we assess like, "Oh, at a certain age, this is kind of what's
what you
normative."
expect. Yeah,
Right, what we can
yeah,
expect. We lose all that once people, like, have an adult body, and maybe they're in their
yeah.
20s, and we forget that or don't know, because a lot of times people don't know that adults continue to really not only develop their horizontal skill set, but their internal capacity, that that's a possibility. So when we meet somebody, and as you move into your program and you're starting to listen to people differently, it's like, well, where are they at? Because if they're here, they're going to be able to listen one way. And if they're here, they can listen to something
Mm.
else. But they can't listen. If they're here, they can't listen to up here. It's not possible, just like with those kids, right? And
Got it.
so
So you have to really
listening,
assess
yeah,
what their starting point is.
yeah, exactly. And that's the leader. And then you have a team, which means more people. And so where are they generally at? I mean, there's just like a lot of complexity
There's a
here.
lot happening.
There's a lot happening. Yeah.
So, do you
Hmm.
recommend is it better I mean, I'm just gonna make I don't wanna make any assumptions. You have to
Uh-huh.
start with the leader, obviously, right? Because that everything
Yeah.
kinda goes down from that. Is it better to
Hmm.
start with the leader by him or her by himself and get them to a certain point and then bring the team into it, or do it
Hmm.
all at once?
That's a great question. And it really, this sounds like a therapy answer. Like it kind of
That's
depends.
okay. It
You
depends.
know, it kind of depends on where are they at in the business or the
Yeah.
organization? How functioning or not is their team? Maybe they already have a pretty well performing team.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research about highly performing teams and outstanding performing teams. Google did that work years ago. And the differentiator between, wow, this team is great versus this team is outstanding, there are two key factors, and one of them is psychological safety, and the other one is
Mm.
willingness to be vulnerable. Those two factors made all the difference. Technology and technical skills aside, those two things, that's the difference. And so, kind of assessing, like, oh, doing a team assessment, right? Doing a personal and a team assessment. So, depending on who it is and what their organization is, I might intervene in different ways or suggest different things.
And that's so interesting when you said, making sure they have being vulnerable, which is hard for people, I think, as they age, or I think it's hard for people in general. It's
It's
not
hard
easy
for
for
people.
Yeah, it's not easy for me to be vulnerable. So being
Yeah.
vulnerable and feeling safe, and those are 2 areas that you don't see in business. Because when you see people who are vulnerable, you see people who speak up. Now, it's been a
Yeah.
long time since I've been in an
Mhm.
organization like that for a couple of years. But
Mm,
people, you can look at people around a table and think, or maybe you know somebody. Say you're in a conference table and you know the person. It's someone you're close to on the team, and something is being brought to light, and they're not talking, and they want to talk, but they hold their tongue because they
mhm.
don't feel safe in the
Yeah,
environment. Now, I would
yeah.
assume that from my own this is just my own experience. I don't know what
Mhm,
your experience, because you've been in way more organizations than I've ever been in, is that I feel like that's more prevalent than not, right?
mhm.
It's more because you
It's
feel
pretty
like there's
prevalent.
repercussions or someone's gonna say somebody or
Mhm.
whatever, all those kinds
Yeah.
of things. I remember back in the day, and you recall this, I feel like it has changed. I had my boss say to me, and this is 1989. He said, I don't wanna know anything about you personally. I don't wanna hear about what you did on the weekend. Business is business, personal is personal, and I don't want you and I oh, and he also said, I don't want you crying either." Okay? So I
Mm,
proceeded to say to him in this initial meeting, "I think you're I called him an asshole in the meeting because I didn't care if you fired
okay.
me. I said, "You're an
Mhm,
asshole because I
mhm,
actually am not a crier, and don't make
mhm,
assumptions that I wanna hear about wanna share my weekend with you," right? Well,
mhm.
fast forward 3 weeks, he was the one sitting in my cube telling me about his 5-year-old, right? He was the one that then was coming to me personally. But
Mhm.
what's so interesting is that's how it was back then. They
A
didn't Huh?
Actually, it's that legacy that you're talking about,
It's
yes,
still
it was
here?
like that. It's definitely still here. It's better, but what's happened is some of the loosening in the social structure
That's what I wanted to
over
ask you.
time has It's created an opening for more of us to talk and share. And we could get off on a whole tangent about women in the workplace. We don't need to do that for a second, but we could definitely go there. The idea that business is business and personal is personal, or that it's all about your thinking and decision making and you can't have emotion, that is fundamentally it's erroneous. It is impossible from a body brain perspective to do that. It's actually our sensations and emotions that drive our thinking that impact our decisions. It's not the other way around. And so there's all kinds of places we could go with that, but it's still here. And one of the things, I think you probably saw it maybe out on LinkedIn. I recently had the really good fortune. These people were generous with their time. I interviewed a bunch of
I know,
leaders.
I read the
Y-
article. The
You read
article
the report.
was,
Yeah.
well, your whole thing was amazing. I mean, it was
Yeah.
written real well. I shared it, but go
hmm
ahead because you interviewed a number of people for
Right. I
that.
did a listening tour specifically to hear because I was making like, okay, I'm probably assuming too much. Let me go talk to people and
Yeah,
really, really, really listen to what their experiences are today. Like, what's it like to lead today in 2025, 2026? And one of the predominant theme that came up was that fear is active and alive, and people are contracting. They're not talking as much. They're nervous about the
mhm.
repercussions of what they say. One of the other themes had a lot to do with there's a lot of contraction happening, but new openings are happening, places to talk that we didn't see. But psychological safety is still really, really key. And so, what Dean said to you years ago, Dean Witter, and now fast forward, you can still chat with him, is because you've developed the relationship over time, which is
Yeah,
essential. But it
yeah,
requires you holding space for him when he's talking about his 5-year-old. And now, fast forward, can we be vulnerable? And
yeah.
vulnerability does not have to come in, I'm going to tell you my whole bloody life story. It could be just finding moments of common
Mm,
where we're common, like where did you grow up and what did you do? And what all those kinds of questions are
yeah.
initial steps in vulnerability. It does not have to be a horrible trauma story to create a little bit of opening for vulnerability. And
Well,
leaders go first.
that makes me a little bit that's a little disappointing that it hasn't developed more than I thought it did because
Mm,
I mean, I see and let me ask you this question. You talk
okay.
about high performing teams or high performance. How is that being defined? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and you're gonna get about 85 gazillion answers about that. But what
Yeah.
I would say is in businesses, they're talking about their revenue, they're talking about their
So it's
sales.
always the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers. And I'm gonna say high performing teams like the ones that they interviewed at Google. This is Project Aristotle a long time ago now. What they found is those teams could rock and roll, and the high performance had to do with showing up, creating cultures where people could be safe. So that means more people can get
Because you're more
involved.
creative.
You're more creative, you have access to all of that. So I assess a lot of high performance behavior based on the culture, not just
Yes.
the metrics. The metrics are really important, but there's a guy, Ed Freeman. He's a professor. I think he's retired now at the University of Virginia at the Darden School of Business. And
Okay.
he developed the stakeholder model in doing business. So not just focusing on shareholders, but focusing on stakeholders. Like
Okay. We hear
who
that
are
all the
your
time.
stakeholders in
Yeah.
business? And he
Yeah.
says, we need red blood cells as humans, but we don't exist to create red blood cells. Businesses need money, revenue, profits, metrics, but they don't exist for that. They exist for something else altogether. And if that brings us back to purpose, and so if leaders can dial into why do you do the business you do? Why do you care? And if you
Yeah.
don't care, and if you're only focused on generating
Transactions.
profits, it's all transactional. And we see a lot of this currently in the environment. The businesses, so a lot
Can
of
we
the
talk
PE
about
stuff.
that?
Yeah, we could talk a little about it. Yeah.
Let's talk about that because what I wanna get your take being a doctor of psychology. So, let's talk about AI, and let's talk
Okay.
and why this is so
Mhm.
dear to my heart is because it's affecting hiring, and it's affecting people's lives,
Yeah.
and that's when I say dear to my heart, I don't mean I'm excited about AI. What I'm saying is I see the effects it's having on people.
hmm
So, I was just had a conversation this morning, a VP of
hmm
finance, and we were talking about AI. This is a well-known company in Chicago. I'm not gonna name the company. It's
Mhm.
also has a big tech platform as well. And I
Mhm.
said to him, I said, "How," he was interviewing an analyst. I said, "So how is AI? What's going on through AI initiatives?" Oh, he was just being just pushed and pushed and pushed. I go, "How do you think it's gonna affect financial analysts?" He goes, "They're gonna be eliminated." He goes, "They will be eliminated." So some people will say to me, and I think you're overreacting, as I don't think I am overreacting here because we are losing positions. And
Mhm.
so I think what's so interesting is this whole dynamic of having a relationship with a, would you say, non-cognitive being, this I don't know, bot, what do you want to call it?
An avatar.
An avatar, and it's in your workplace, and it's a coworker to some extent. People name
Mhm.
them. They have names.
Yes, they
And now
do.
you have this whole other dynamic with it. And I worry about the mental health of the people. Like, what is happening from the mental health standpoint? And then you see this whole, not to get political, so I won't get political, but it's not really political, it's just facts. You have a few people in leadership on these AI companies that's just pushing their agenda down
Mhm.
everyone's throat. And they are using fear to do this. You'll see
Mhm.
on LinkedIn, act now, you're gonna get left behind. You know how you're gonna lose your job? You're gonna lose your job because you're not gonna know how to use AI. And what I've been hearing, and that's why I'm curious to hear what you're hearing from the
Yeah,
leaders.
yeah.
Some of the first things out of their mouth in interviews now is, "Tell me how you implement AI. Tell me what you've done with AI. What are you gonna do with this team with AI?"
Mhm.
It is all they're talking about now. Like,
Mm.
it's just not good. And
Mhm.
so I don't know. What are you seeing with it? And what is your thoughts with people and adapting to that? And like, what?
Well, the report that I wrote, which people could find on my website, is called Still in It.
Yeah.
These leaders are all in it. AI came up in every conversation that I had with people. And it wasn't because I was asking about it, it came up naturally. And my husband happens to work in this space a lot and has a book coming out himself this fall that's talking about AI and empathy. And so we've had lots
Oh,
and lots of
oh,
conversations.
do
You probably
share.
want to have him on here
I
at
would
some
love
point.
it.
Yeah, he has a definite point of view about, like,
What's
and
his
what I would
background?
say is his
What,
background, comes from a tech background, and now he does a lot of coaching and as well and does sales and that kind of stuff. So seriously, I should probably introduce you to him.
yeah.
But in the course of conversations with him and a group of colleagues that we have these conversations on the regular just to kind of keep ourselves learning and then
Yeah.
listening to clients. AI is a huge disruptor. It's going to be the same kind of magnitude, only bigger, that we saw with the dot-com era. Like, many people can't remember what it was like to not have a computer and certainly not to
Yeah.
do what we're doing online, right? So
Oh,
this
yeah.
is going to disrupt in ways that we don't really know yet what's possible.
Yes. We
And
don't know yet.
I'm no AI expert, but what I can say is, how do we keep what's human human, and how do we use AI appropriately to do some of the analytical work that can happen? Even the guy who said analysts will be gone, I would tend to disagree. They're going to do all the background metric analysis, but you're still going to need a human to make it make sense in terms of the larger goal of the organization or the impact that they want to have.
I
But
think
it's
it's
going to be
gonna impact
tricky.
the entry levels, though. I think it's gonna and I think it's, so this is my biggest concern. So
Yeah, what is it? Mhm.
some of the entry level positions that come in to learn, right? The graduates
Yeah.
from college, even attorneys, even whatever,
Uh-huh.
those are
Yeah.
the automation that they're being able to do. Well, if they automate that level, of
Right.
course, I don't have to tell you, we don't have a career ladder, we don't have any future leaders. So
Mhm.
we've just cut out this entire section of
Yes.
people that we're not
Yes.
developing. And then also, what's gonna happen to the critical thinking? Because part of critical thinking is understanding how things fit together. You can't
That's
critically
right.
think if you don't understand building blocks of it, right?
Yeah, the
So if you have,
system.
yeah. So if you have something spitting it out at you
Right.
don't understand what the building blocks are, right? It's kind of like when
Right.
we use long arithmetic versus using a calculator.
Yeah.
We literally had to
Yeah.
do did it on paper, and you learn
Mhm.
something like that, the way your brain works, right? I mean, I hope you're right. I hope that it's not going to be elimination. I don't think anyone knows what it's going to be, but I was watching
Mhm.
Darby CEO, and he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He's a
Hmm.
scientist. He was kind of considered the father of AI. And
Mm.
they just did 2 hours with him, and I don't remember his name. And when he starts talking, because he understands it at a different level, I think, than most people understand it, me
Sure.
included,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's very concerned.
Mhm.
He's very concerned,
Mhm.
and a lot of these guys are spending their time, the only way to kinda control it, because there's a race to the finish line. There's a race to the finish line between these
Mhm.
companies and everybody else and
Right.
with supposedly China. They see it as a threat. We've got to get there
Mhm.
first to general AI because if we don't, then we're
Mhm.
going to be at a disadvantage. And what
Well,
these
that's
other
what they
people are,
say. That's
that's
what
what
they
they
say.
that's what they
Mhm.
say. That doesn't mean that's
Mhm.
the truth.
Correct.
But they're saying if there's not some legislature around it, it's going to be can cause a lot of problems. And the only
Right.
way to get legislature, that's the only way to really put the guardrails on is they have. Now,
Mhm.
I understand, and you probably know this. My
Mm,
therapist friend said to me, they already
mm,
was it August of 2025. There's already
mm.
a law that AI cannot be used in therapy.
And so that's all in dispute and question. There's going to be a lot of, from a HIPAA compliance perspective for medical and
I
mental
didn't
health,
even think of that angle.
there's going to be all of that in terms of how it can be used. And what I would say, Renee, is even like what you said you see on LinkedIn or even listening to this gentleman who has this kind of higher level understanding, we could focus on the gloom and doom. And we could like, holy cow. And you're right to say there's a whole bunch of people in a certain age range that are going to miss some options. But I would say, on the other hand, there's an opening there. What are we going to do then? Because we still have a civic and moral obligation to these young people coming up
We
to work
do.
together. We do. And so there's an opportunity there that I have no idea how we're going to fill that. But I think if we, instead of like just gloom and doom, like what's possible here and what can we create, because we're not going to be able to put the genie in the bottle back again. It's just
No,
not
that's
happening.
it's
No.
clear.
Hmm.
It's that
Yeah.
that is clear. It's clear. I think the point was we have to keep talking about putting some
Hmm.
guardrails on this from a lot of different
Yes.
angles and not let it just go
Yeah.
wild like we because it's affecting all of
That's
us.
right. It is. Hmm.
It's affecting everybody. So,
Hmm.
did you know that I didn't know
Hmm.
this till I did some research that ChatGPT used to be a nonprofit. It was started as a nonprofit for the greater
Hmm.
good. You
And
know
now
that.
it's not.
Now
Yes,
it's
I
not.
do that.
So, it was supposed to
Yeah.
be again, that's why it was called OpenAI. It was supposed to help
Hmm.
healthcare and
That's right.
science and,
Right.
all these things to help humanity, and then it became a money grab, and then the problem you have is that they have the money to lobby, you know?
Right.
And all
Right.
these big data centers are also causing some.
Well, they're calling all kinds of environmental issues the data centers, not to mention. So, by the way, do you know Tristan Harris, that name?
I do know that name.
Tristan Harris worked at Google, left
Kristen
Google. He was
is
their
the
chief.
redheaded. He's redhead.
Yes. Yes. He was the
He did an
chief.
episode with the
Yes.
CEO, yeah, of
Yes.
yes, and he's
So,
totally
yes, he's somebody he's an advocate for we need to be in the
yes.
conversation to create the guardrails so we can do both and instead of either or and have massive destruction. And so he's a voice to really be listening to in this space for those of us who are concerned. But I would say this, I get nervous about it. This group that I work with every week and we have conversations, many of which lately have been the last year and a half on AI and how we're going to work with AI and how it's dangerous and how it could be really helpful.
Yeah,
It's great to have a place to talk about these things and
yes,
really sort them out.
yeah.
But what I would say is all of us who care about the planet and care about each other need to find people to talk to about this stuff and to keep ourselves educated. Tristan's one of those voices. There are other voices because we don't want to be just at the mercy of our own anxiety and get
No, but
agitated, right? We
absolutely,
don't.
like, y but it's
Yeah.
kinda like what
Mm-mm.
they were saying is what can we do to help with this? And I think that's the
Yeah.
point, right? We need to elect
Yeah.
people that are going
Mhm.
to put some legislature in place, that are gonna
Yeah.
put some
Yeah.
guardrails in place, that need to look at how it's gonna affect
Mhm.
people and the greater good of the people, and
Yeah.
Tristan is one of the guys that I listened to. Now, if you listen to him
Mhm.
on the Diary of a CEO, did you listen to that episode?
Oh, I
He's
did not. I'm sorry. I didn't get a chance.
That's okay. He's on the Diary of a CEO, and I listened to his whole thing, and you can see in his face
Yeah.
how sincere he is about this. I'm sure he's
Yes.
not popular with his group because he's an insider
Uh-huh.
on this, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm
Uh-huh.
sure he's not. I'm sure he's sticking his neck
Mhm.
out on here, but you can see that I can see that he's trying to make it a little bit more dramatic and gloom and doom. I think he's doing it on purpose for people to listen, right? Because
Mhm.
he wants people to listen. And if he
Mhm.
crafts the message in a certain way, this is what I'm thinking. He starts to get
Mm.
people's attention to maybe get right. So if he's like, okay, this is going to be the end of the human race. This is on one hand,
Mm.
or we can have utopia on the other hand. But the
Mhm.
leaders of the AI company are saying it's a 20 to 30% chance of a major catastrophe with it. That's a pretty high
That's
percentage.
kinda high. That's like 3 out of every 10.
That's kind of high,
Two
right?
and a half and
So
3.
they
Mhm.
don't know.
Nope.
And I don't know, who knows? Maybe it's energy that slows the whole thing down. You know what I mean? Because there's not enough
Hmm.
energy I
Well,
don't
that might be it, then not enough energy to support all the data centers
yeah.
that support all the stuff that we're doing.
But you're seeing the pressure on the leaders internally and
Yeah.
in their teams and everything, and they're and so
Yes.
what are they saying? What's the consensus, or is there even
Well,
one?
so generally speaking, in the listening tour that I did and in the leaders that
Yeah,
I'm working with, when it comes to AI, people want to be, I mean, I give people a lot of credit. They want to be smart. They want to educate themselves. They want
yeah,
to kind of know so they can make wise decisions about implementing some decisions around AI organization wide. I think generally people are curious and a little bit nervous. And so that is a really great learning opening, and if we can keep that open, I think that we can solve for it together. It's when we get tipped over into more anxiety that I think
yeah.
it's not going to be good. And there are
Yeah.
reasons to be anxious, to be clear, but we don't want to live there, I don't think at all.
No,
So, mm-mm,
no. No,
mm-mm,
you can't put your head in the sand. I mean, I
no.
tried to use an agent for this really difficult search. It bombed horribly. I mean,
Uh,
it had too many variables. It wasn't a repetitive thing, and it did
mm-hmm,
a poor job of it. So you have to experiment with, you kind of have to understand it. You know, you can't put your head in the sand. And I obviously do
hmm
see some
hmm
advantages. So there's no doubt about it. There's advantages
yeah.
to it. I just think we have to
hmm
think about what it does to, we just have to be mindful of what it does
Yes.
to everybody
Yes.
and what it's kinda
Yes.
doing as a whole, not just again,
That's right.
they have an obligation as shareholders to optimize revenue, optimize profits, and that's always what is top of mind, and they're spending a lot of money on this AI. I mean, companies are spending a lot
Yes.
of money,
Yes.
and I don't know if they're getting the ROI on it. There's some chatter about that, but what do you
hmm
see in the leadership side? Do you see it manifesting in with anxiety, or
Oh, yeah.
because the pace is kinda crazy.
Well, the pace, everything is accelerated. And so
Accelerated.
the big thing that we're dealing with climate, politics, global economics, AI, all of it is really how do we as humans become much more able to be nimble and centered and be clear-headed. And if we can't do that, we will get, you know, turned all over by all the stuff that's happening, which comes back to, so when I'm working with someone, a leader, and they're concerned about, let's say, AI and the impact on their organization, I'll dial in with them. Like, how are you doing? How are you handling your own anxiety? What does it look like? Where does it go? How does it manifest? How does it show up on your teams? Because if they can't go first, they'll either ignore it or they'll offload it to some IT guy who doesn't know anymore. And so really it's kind of like stepping back to like assess. And if people can't pause to do that, there's lots of kinds of pauses. That's why pausing is so essential, to heighten our awareness so we can be really present when we make the decisions that we make so we can execute with the people that we need to. So I just want to say this because I know we'll run out of time here. The
Yeah, whatever
Leadership
you want.
Pause is the book I wrote a few years ago. And I have this upcoming workbook that is a companion, the
Oh,
Leadership
nice.
Pause book of practices. And it walks you through how to take on the practices so that you can work with yourself and your team to bring yourself more present. So when these conversations come up, or
Yep.
when you read the Wall Street Journal or you read Crane's Chicago, that you see stuff and you don't automatically go into a tizzy, right?
Right?
Or avoidance. It's
I
like,
do a
okay,
little bit.
we could do that. Yeah, yeah,
I get
for
worked up
sure.
over it.
Because we're biological beings. And of course you do, because there's a little part in the brain in the back that says threat, 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 and we have to take
Yeah.
action.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So we have to
yeah,
get to know it really well.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
So you're getting this workbook's coming out, you're saying?
Yes.
You
It's
built
coming
a
out.
workbook?
My book launch. I'm sorry that I forgot to bring I
What
have
do you
a
mean your
proof
book launch?
copy
You have
of it.
another book you wrote?
Yeah, I have a workbook that's coming out on April 27th, Monday.
Okay.
It is the companion to this guy, so it's
Oh,
dark
nice.
with a white, but it goes through the entire book and breaks it down and offers
Oh, nice.
practices that you can
Oh,
work on.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really groovy about the workbook is you can use a QR code. And when you do, it takes you right to the audio. So you can listen to
I don't know how you
this
have
book
time to do all
and then
this.
you can walk through all this. I'm kind of wired this way,
I
just kind of
know.
fun.
Yeah, you're like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the more the happy, right? The more that we do, the more
Well,
happy we get.
and the more we can help people
Yeah,
start to get a grip. That's really it.
yeah,
That's really, really
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So with that So with these leaders with this AI, this is interesting because you brought something up about the high
Hmm.
performing teams in Google. There was two things in common:
Hmm.
vulnerability, and you felt safe in a safe environment, to
Psychological safety. Hmm.
psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that I see with this is that I don't know. Maybe I'm this is just my point of view. So it's not a
Hmm.
general point of view.
Hmm.
But I find myself a little bit
Hmm.
holding back about how I feel about AI in general. But people in the workplace, they're saying they're for it, but deep down, because of the
Fear.
anxiety or wondering if you've been replaced, they're not
Hmm.
voicing it. I mean, you and I'm independent,
Hmm.
right? So it's
Yeah.
different for us. But if you're in that situation, especially as we know, as workers get older,
Hmm.
they're usually
Yeah.
generally less
Hmm.
adaptive, right? Why
Hmm.
is that, Doc?
We get old and we want to learn less. We get too comfortable. I mean,
I
there's
guess
that.
that's what it is,
But
right?
you asked this earlier about what I was seeing. One of the people that I interviewed for the listening tour, that her voice shows up in the report that I wrote, is a recruiter. And one of the things that she said is, "Oh, you know what I see is there's so much uncertainty and some anxiety about it. Not only are people not talking about it or voicing their maybe dissent, is they're also waiting, the leaders are waiting to make hiring decisions because they think that more will come out and it will be more clear. And the reality is, it's probably not going to be really clear for a really long time. And so then what happens is the next cycle of budgeting happens and they haven't filled this. And now they got more pressure for the next go round. And you're probably seeing all that in spades, just like this other gal that I was talking to. So there's a lot of that. So the more facile we can be with working with ourselves and not having false harmony, just saying yes to
Yeah.
get along. But we're
Yeah.
afraid. There's a general sense of that. Like, is it okay for me politically, whatever that means, to speak up? Because what will
Yeah.
happen? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you're not gonna adopt it, then you're out. You've gotta get off here because you have a call.
Go so,
Let me
but
sign
this
you
has
off.
been so great.
I know. Well,
Um,
next time we'll have a longer session because I think we could
cool.
talk. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being in the hiring room. You're awesome,
Uh-huh.
Dr. Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining me in the hiring room. If you like the podcast, please subscribe below and share this episode with someone you think that would benefit from it. We're always looking for good people to interview. So if you have a referral, comment below, or you can email me at renee@mseedinc.com. Thanks. Till next time.